Hello everyone, Ron Johnson here from L.T.L Tutoring Central. And today I'm talking about tips for business emails, something a little different. It's just a very quick video with a few tips for when you're writing business emails, of course, as the title says. There are a few things to watch out for. I'm not going to talk about them here because I talk about them so briefly within the video, so just have a look. Hopefully these are very helpful for you. Also check out the blog. It has the same tips, but sometimes it's good to see it in print as well as video. All right, let's get started on tips for writing business emails or handling business emails. The first tip, and probably the most important one, is to stay current on company policy for email use. All the other tips I'm going to provide are basically contingent on what the company policy is. So you do need to know what your company expects and what their directives are on emails. You can check with the Human Resources Department if there is such a thing. If not, just check with someone senior who would be aware of the policy for email. Answer emails promptly. There's nothing more annoying than sending off an email and waiting days for a response, especially nowadays where people are receiving their emails on their cell phones. Even if they do have them on their computer, they're often forwarded to their cell phones. So try to answer as soon as possible. Use conventional spelling and punctuation. I recommend this for business emails, formal emails. Uh, I know a lot of people text and use a lot of short forms, and that's coming through emails as well. I've received some emails that are becoming almost impossible to read. Um, so use conventional spelling and punctuation. After all, it is a business, so treat it professionally. Use an accurate subject in your subject line. The subject line helps the reader to know what the message is going to be about. If they, for example, need to grab a document or a report or some other information, they'll know to do that before they open up the message and try to respond to it. It helps them to organize their messages and prioritize, etc. So make sure you use an accurate subject in your subject line that tells the reader briefly what this message is about. Emails are not the place for highly sensitive information. So if you have confidential or sensitive information that needs to be handled in some way, there are other methods. Speaking to the person privately is probably one of the best, but emails are not great for that. It's also very difficult sometimes if there's excuse me, on a something emotional about the message. It's sometimes difficult to get the wording correctly so that the reader knows exactly what you mean. So it's best to meet in person. Keep your message short and to the point. So you've got a good subject line. Now, make sure that you have a good, concise message. You want to make sure that you are getting your point across, but you want to do so in a way that helps the reader once again. You don't need to give a whole lot of extraneous information and too much to read through when everyone is very busy. So just get to the point and make sure that it says what you want it to, but you don't have to add a lot of extra information. If there are other reports or pieces of information that you think might be relevant, you could do that as an attachment perhaps, but the message should be brief. When forwarding an email, add a note to explain how the message relates to the reader. Again, you're thinking about and you're having some consideration for the person receiving the email, and you're helping that person know how to prioritize and how to respond to this email. Be careful to use the reply all. Do not reply all unless you actually do want everyone to get the message. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that button. We've all heard horror stories about hitting reply all and sending a message. I talked earlier about not sending sensitive information or confidential information, but sometimes that happens and you hit reply all. Everybody gets that message. But it's also just annoying if everyone is receiving messages that they don't need. Send it to the specific person or the people that actually need to see this particular message. If you receive an emotional or controversial message, take your time to think through your response. So it's a little related to the earlier one. If you have received a message that's sensitive in nature, you might not want to reply at all by email. You may want to handle it in another way. But if you are going to answer a message that makes you emotional, take time, walk away, count to 10 or count to 1,000, whatever you need, and think carefully about your response and word your response carefully. There's no need to escalate that controversy or that emotion, and sometimes it's unintended anyway. So always be careful if you receive an emotional or controversial message. Inappropriate messages should not be shared or forwarded. So these should be handled outside of the email forum. So if you receive something that you don't think is appropriate, then there are avenues within your workplace that can be handled. Again, if you have a human resources department, they might be able to direct you in that regard. Otherwise, you talk to your manager or your boss, or it depends on the workplace, of course. But if it's inappropriate, it shouldn't be passed through the email system. So do not share or forward those kinds of messages. There we are, a few tips for writing business emails and handling business emails. Just remember that if you are in a profession, you should handle things more academically, more business-like. So using proper English is helpful. Helping the reader, always help the reader, no matter what you're writing. Think of the reader. How can you help? How can you make that subject line more concise, more accurate? How can you make the message brief and to the point so that he or she doesn't have to read a novel to get the message for business so they can get on with the rest of their business. All right, it's Ron Johnson from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Keep learning and keep having fun. Bye-bye for now.